The stench hit Boone Carter like a wall. Thick, sour, unnatural. It was the kind of smell you never forget. Something long dead, yes, but also something that had clung to life too long beside it. His horse jerked its head and let out a nervous snort, hooves shifting in the dirt just outside a cabin that looked like it hadn't welcomed the living in years. But Boone wasn't a man to spook easy. He'd trailed criminals across deserts, through mountain passes, into dens where men whisper of curses and ghosts. This cabin? Just another stop on the trail. He'd been tracking the Crimson Creek gang for 3 punishing days under the Nevada sun. The bounty on their leader's head was enough to keep a man comfortable for months. But the moment Boone stepped through the half-hinged door, money vanished from his mind. The interior of the cabin was dim, shafts of dust-choked light cutting through holes in the roof. In the far corner, he saw her, a girl, no more than 13, crouched beside a heap of bones. Her hair was tangled and filthy, and the remnants of a dress hung from her thin frame. But it wasn't her condition that made Boone's skin crawl. It was what connected her to the dead. A rusted iron shackle was clamped around her ankle. Its chain snaked across the floor and locked around the skeletal wrist of a long-dead man. His bones were sun-bleached and brittle, but remnants of worn fabric still clung to him. Enough for Boone to know he hadn't died out in the open. He'd died here, and she had stayed. The girl's eyes met his, steady, haunting. There was no panic in them, no begging, just the heavy stare of someone who'd been left alone with silence for too long. He stepped carefully, the floor crunching beneath his boots, bone fragments scattered across the boards. She didn't flinch, didn't move. "Child," Boone said, lowering himself a few steps closer, "how long have you been here?" The girl's voice came like wind through dry reeds, barely there, cracked and low. "Are you here to take me away from Papa?" Boone swallowed. He looked down at the skeleton again. The clothing, the size. This wasn't just a stranger. This was someone she had loved. "That your father?" She nodded slowly, her hand brushing one of the bones. "His name is Silas Whitmore." The name struck Boone like a blow to the chest. Silas Whitmore. Every bounty hunter west of the river knew that name. Robber, murderer, vanished 3 years ago with a fortune taken from a Carson City bank. Reward never claimed. Legend said he disappeared into the desert and was never seen again. Now, here he was, what was left of him, and his daughter, still chained his ghost. "When did he die?" Boone asked quietly. Her eyes flicked to the skeleton, then back to Boone. "After the bad men came. They beat him, made him cough up blood. But he wouldn't tell them where the money was. He made me promise to stay. Said the buzzards would steal his bones if I left, and then he'd never rest." Boone scanned the room again, this time noticing little details he'd missed. Faded flowers set near the bones, pieces of cloth folded into small piles. The girl had been tending to the remains, watching over them, decorating them like some kind of makeshift shrine. The men who hurt him, Boone said, "How long ago was that?" She shrugged faintly. "Long time. They wanted the money he hid. He said they'd come back if they thought I knew anything. But I didn't." Boone knelt beside her, heart pounding for a new reason now. If Silas had stashed the money before he died, and those men had tortured him without results, that fortune could still be out there. And this girl might be the only person left who knew where. "Mercy," he asked gently, "do you know where your papa hid the money?" Fear flashed across her face. She pulled the chain tighter around her ankle. "Papa said it was the only thing keeping me safe. If I told anyone, they'd kill me too." And then, like a prophecy being fulfilled, the sound of horses reached their ears. The rhythm of hooves over hard-pan dirt. 5 riders at least. Boone's fingers moved to the grip of his revolver before his brain caught up. They were coming fast, and he knew that voice yelling orders even before he saw the man behind it. Dutch Kellerman, ruthless, savage, a man who didn't believe in mercy. And if he was here, he hadn't come for a conversation. "They're back," the girl whispered, eyes wide with terror. "The bad men." Boone checked the window. 5 riders, armed, fanning out, trapping the cabin. No way this was coincidence. Someone had caught wind of Boone's investigation and followed it straight here. He turned back to the girl. I need you to tell me. Now, where's the money? Her voice dropped. It's cursed. Papa said everyone who touches it dies. Curse or not, they'll kill us both if we stay here. Boone snapped. She hesitated, then pointed to the skeleton. He swallowed it. The map. Before he died. He said if it stayed with him, no one would ever find it. It's still inside him. Boone stared at the bones, realization dawning. Dutch and his men had probably searched the whole area, expecting buried treasure. But Silas had hidden the only clue inside himself. That's why the girl hadn't left. She wasn't just mourning, she was guarding it. And now they were out of time. Boone grabbed a pickaxe leaning against the far wall. We have to get this chain off. Now! Before he could strike, Mercy clutched his arm. He said someone would come. A man with kind eyes and dangerous hands. Said he'd try to save me, but only if I told him the truth. The sounds outside grew louder. Dutch shouting, boots hitting the ground, a rifle being cocked. Boone tightened his grip. Mercy, if we stay, we die. She looked once more at the remains of her father, then finally gave a single, silent nod. As Boone raised the pickaxe to break her chain, he couldn't help but feel the weight of her father's warning. The money was cursed. But what scared him more wasn't the curse. It was what men like Dutch Kellerman were willing to do for it. And they were already at the door. The door to the dusty cabin didn't open. It shattered. Splinters flew as a boot slammed to the rotted wood, letting the desert sun blaze inside. 5 men stood in the light, weapons drawn, casting long shadows across the room. The one in front stepped forward, his hand resting casually on his pistol. Well, he said, voice thick with mockery. Looks like a little family gathering. Boone rose slowly from where he'd crouched near the hearth, keeping his hands in plain sight, but ready to draw at a moment's notice. He was badly outnumbered, 5-1, and had a chained girl cowering behind him, plus a secret buried in the bones of the corpse she clung to. But the next words from the man in front of him changed everything Boone thought he knew. Hello, Uncle Boone, the man said with a bitter smirk. Been a long time since Carson City. The word struck Boone like a punch to the gut. He stared at the speaker, tried to reconcile the hardened outlaw in front of him with the memory of a teenager he hadn't seen in 15 years. Same eyes, same jawline, just older now, sharpened by rage and crime. Danny? Boone murmured, barely believing it. It's Dutch now, the man replied coldly. Been Dutch ever since you left me to rot behind bars. Dutch strode into the cabin, his men spreading out behind him like a pack of wolves. Funny how things work out. I came looking for Silas Whitmore's gold, and instead found dear old Uncle Boone playing guardian to a chained-up stray. The girl, Mercy, pressed herself closer to the skeleton behind her, fear tightening every muscle in her body as the chain at her ankle rattled. Boone's mind flew back 15 years, to a night in Carson City, when Danny had still been just a boy. Wild loss, grieving. After losing his parents, he had followed Boone everywhere, desperate for family. Boone had tried to steer him right. But Danny had chosen the fast road, fast friends, fast crimes. And when he robbed a general store, Boone had been the one who turned him in. I did what I thought was right, Boone said slowly. You were heading somewhere dark. I figure a few months in jail might straighten you out. Dutch let out a dry, cruel laugh. A few months? They gave me 5 years. 5 years in hell. And it was your signature that put me there. He drew his weapon with slow, deliberate intent, like he wanted Boone to feel every second of what was coming. I learned a lot in prison. Like how loyalty doesn't mean a damn thing. Power, though, that's real. One of his men, a scar-faced brute named Pike, stepped toward Mercy. Boss, what about the girl? She knows where the stash is. Dutch grinned, keeping his aim on Boone. Oh, I'm sure she does. Guarding Daddy's bones like a loyal pup. Ain't that right, sweetheart? You know where your papa stashed all that beautiful gold. Mercy's voice trembled but held firm. My papa never stole anything. He was a good man. Pike barked a laugh. Good man? That killer took out more folks than half the gangs in Calera. That's when Boone knew he had no good options left. He could try to outgun 5 men, maybe save the girl, or maybe die and leave her worse off. Or he could surrender and pray for a better chance later. What would you do? Fight and likely die, or wait and hope? Boone looked deep into Dutch's face, trying to find even a sliver of the boy he once loved. But that boy was gone. What remained was a killer who shared his blood. "Danny," Boone said, voice low, "you're not laying a hand on this girl." Dutch chuckled, stepping in closer. "Uncle Boone, you're in no shape to stop me. But don't worry, we'll make it quick. Family discount." But Dutch had forgotten one thing. The most important thing Boone ever tried to teach him. Never turn your back on a desperate man. Boone's hand moved faster than Dutch expected. The revolver cleared leather in a blur. One shot to Pike's chest before he could touch the girl. Another man at the door dropped before he even aimed. Dutch and the remaining two ducked behind cover as bullets shredded the cabin. "Get down!" Boone shouted to Mercy, but she was already on the floor, still shackled to her father's remains, her range of movement pitiful. From behind a flipped table, Dutch snarled, "Big mistake, Uncle. Now we take our time." Gunfire ripped through the air. Boone dug behind the stone hearth, reloading quickly. 2 shots gone for left. 3 enemies still firing. "Mercy," he called out. "Can you reach that pickaxe?" The girl stretched toward the rusty tool Boone had dropped earlier. Chains clinked. Almost. Glass shattered as Dutch's man circled around back. Boone fired blindly through the window. A scream told him it landed. 2 left. Dutch was yelling, "Jacobs, go around. Morrison, pin him down. We need him alive long enough to talk." Dutch still didn't understand. The treasure wasn't hidden in the desert. It was here, in Silas Whitmore's bones. The man had swallowed the only map before he died. It had died with him. Mercy swung the pickaxe hard. The chains began to give. Boone reloaded again, keeping one eye on the windows. "That's it," he urged. "Keep going." A shadow passed by. He fired. Another yell. 1 more down. Dutch shouted from cover, "This ends one way. Uncle, give up now and I'll make it fast. Keep fighting, and I'll let Morrison take his time with her." Finally, with one final strike, the chain snapped. Mercy was free. "There's a tunnel," she whispered. "Papa showed me. Under the floorboards, back corner. Leads out by the well." Boone nodded. Escape. But leaving meant letting Dutch live, and Dutch would never stop chasing them. But neither man realized they were no longer alone. Hoofbeats. Loud, thunderous. Boone's breath caught. He looked through the holes in the walls. Soldiers. A ring of mounted cavalrymen surrounded the cabin, all in uniform. The man in front raised a megaphone and bellowed, "This is Captain Harlan Briggs of the 3rd Cavalry. Lay down your weapons and come out with your hands up." Dutch's face turned to stone. This ain't just about treasure anymore. Boone's mind raced. "Mercy," he said, "what did your father do before all this?" She blinked, confused. He was a soldier, fought in the South. Said he learned to shoot there. What unit? 3rd Cavalry. Everything clicked. Her father hadn't just stolen from a bank. He'd taken army payroll, deserted, and now the army was here to collect both the gold and whoever stood in their way. Dutch's voice wavered. "We got bigger problems, Uncle." Captain Briggs shouted again, "You have 60 seconds. We know Silas Whitmore is inside and in possession of stolen federal property." Mercy's voice trembled. "Papa's been dead for 3 years." But Boone understood. The army didn't know that. They thought Silas was alive, and they'd hang anyone caught with him or his gold. "We have to leave." "Now," Boone said. Dutch nodded, for once not arguing, and just as Morrison raised his head to shoot, a single bullet from outside dropped him in his tracks. The cavalry wasn't waiting anymore. And Boone knew, as he pried open floorboards and helped Mercy down into the dark tunnel, that this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The sharp clap of hoofbeats echoed across the dry canyon walls as the last of Dutch's men scrambled for cover. "We're pulling out," he yelled over the roar of gunfire. "What about the gold?" Morrison shouted back, "Forget the gold. Move." Inside the battered cabin, Dutch and Morrison hurried toward the rear wall, trying to punch through a loose panel of boards when a thunderous voice rang out from outside. "Sil Whitmore." Captain Briggs bellowed. "We know your daughter's in there with you. Send her out unharmed and we'll talk terms." Mercy's breath caught in her throat. Daughter? They thought she was Silas's daughter. Boone's eyes widened with realization. The army believed Silas was alive, hiding inside the cabin, and using his own child as a shield. If that's what they thought, the next step would be brutal and immediate. "They think you're a hostage," Boone said. Mercy's fingers trembled as she clutched the broken iron chain that had once bound her. "If I go out and tell them Papa's dead, they'll ask about the money. He made me swear never to." 30 seconds. Briggs barked. Dutch had already kicked open a loose section of the rear wall. Morrison was right behind him, slipping into the desert shadows. Boone turned back to the girl, then to the skeleton slumped beneath the collapsed beams. Silas Whitmore, long dead. The soldiers were closing in, and every path forward seemed to lead to ruin. If they surrendered, Mercy would be dragged into federal custody and interrogated. If they ran, they'd be fugitives, hunted by the law and Dutch's crew alike. But there was one last play, one option so reckless, so impossible, that it might actually save her. "Mercy," Boone said quickly, "do you trust me?" Before she could reply, Captain Briggs gave the fatal order. "Take the cabin." Gunfire erupted as soldiers flooded in from 3 sides. Splinters and smoke filled the air. Boone grabbed Mercy and yanked open the trapdoor beneath the floorboards. "Down! Now!" They dropped into the darkness just as bullets tore through the walls above. From outside came the chaos of cavalry boots and shouted orders. Inside, the cabin was being shredded by gunpowder and steel. The tunnel beneath was narrow and rough, reinforced by rotting timbers and choked with dust. It sloped downward, winding through the earth toward what Mercy had once mentioned, a forgotten well. "Are you hurt?" Boone asked as they crawled. "No, but my father's bones," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They're destroying everything that was left of him." Boone understood her grief, but the tunnel's age was a more immediate danger. The beams groaned with each movement, and the voices of soldiers above grew louder, searching, closing in. At a fork in the path, Mercy paused. "I don't know which way leads out." "What did he tell you?" Boone urged. "He said, if you're lost underground, always go left." They turned left, but as they crept forward, a voice floated toward them from ahead. Low, amused, and unmistakable. "I know you're down there, Uncle." "Dutch, you've only got 2 ways out," he called. "And Morrison's waiting on the other side." Dutch had found the tunnel system. Somehow, during the chaos, he discovered their escape and cut them off. "We can't go back," Mercy whispered. "The army's behind us." "And Dutch is ahead," Boone said. "We're boxed in." But then Mercy pulled something from the pocket of her torn dress, a small, wrapped bundle. Her hands shook as she unwrapped it. "Papa told me, if things ever got real bad, this would help me." Inside was a yellow document. Boone squinted at it, the dim light barely enough to read the seal. It wasn't a treasure map. It was a presidential pardon. "Mercy," Boone whispered, stunned. "This is real." It's signed by President Grant. Dutch's voice cut through the silence. "Come out, Uncle. Let's end this." Boone stared at the paper. It wasn't for theft or desertion. It was for services rendered to the Union in matters of national security. Silas wasn't a thief, Boone breathed. He was a spy. Mercy's eyes filled with tears. "I knew he wasn't bad. No one believed me." It wasn't outlaws who hunted him. Boone realized. It was Confederate agents. They tortured him trying to uncover secrets. Dutch's boots crunched closer. "I'm losing my patience," he called. Boone made a choice. "Captain Briggs," he shouted toward the surface. "This is Boone Carter. I've got Mercy Whitmore and a document proving Silas was operating under presidential orders." Above, the gunfire halted. Dutch cursed in the tunnel. Captain Briggs's voice filtered down. "What document?" "A pardon. Presidential seal. Signed by Ulysses S. Grant." A long pause. "Come up slowly," the captain called. "Show the document." "We can't," Boone replied. "Dutch Kellerman's between us and the exit." Suddenly, Dutch stepped out of the shadows. His pistol was lowered, confusion written across his face. "A Union spy?" he asked. "That means—" "You've been chasing the wrong prize," Boone said. "And Morrison's about to find out what happens when you threaten the daughter of a federal agent." The sound of cavalry boots thundered from both ends of the tunnel. Captain Briggs had outflanked them, his men close and fast. Dutch looked from Boone to Mercy, then to the document. "I've made some bad choices," Dutch said. "We all have," Boone replied. "But there's still time to make one right one." Dutch holstered his weapon. Moments later, cavalrymen poured in, tackling Morrison as he tried to flee. The standoff was over. Captain Briggs inspected the pardon with reverence. Then he turned to Mercy. "Miss Whitmore," he said solemnly, "your father was a hero. On behalf of the United States, I'm sorry for what you've endured." "Can I bury him now?" she asked. "Properly? He'll be buried at Arlington," Briggs promised, "with full honors." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Boone helped lift Silas Whitmore's remains into a waiting wagon. Mercy would travel east, placed with family who could give her the peace she never had. Dutch sat in cuffs but was quiet, watching the sky. Briggs had heard Boone's plea. There might be leniency for him, given his final choice. Before stepping into the wagon, Mercy looked back. "Papa always said the right man would come," she said. "He was right." Boone tipped his hat. "He was braver than most. Take care, Miss Mercy." As the column rode off into the twilight, Boone turned his horse toward the open desert. There were more battles to fight, more wrongs to make right. But tonight, for the first time in years, he felt like he'd finally done something that mattered. Because sometimes the real treasure isn't gold or silver. It's second chances. And the truth finally finding its way home.